Few rappers burst on the tracks with more explosive energy than New Orleans Mystikal. With a style that is truly one of a kind, Michael Lawrence Tyler rose out of the Big Easy's grimy 12th Ward in the early 90s to become one of Jive Records' most successful rappers and a decorated No Limit soldier. While unsavory events in his life stunted his career, hindering him during his prime, we can separate the art from the artist long enough to contextualize and categorize the catalog of this self-proclaimed Prince of the South. So if you're looking for someone to bring you the definitive list of Mystikal albums, look no further than the man right here. Let's get to it. Number 5, Ghetto Fabulous. In a Vlad TV interview, Mystikal himself admitted that his 1998 album Ghetto Fabulous was his weakest release. This LP was put out during the height of the No Limit Records heyday, when the label would drop more albums in a year than beads thrown in Mardi Gras. Mystikal's third album was just one of 23 releases that year from Masterpiece imprint and was ranked towards the middle of our list of No Limit CDs that came out 2 years before the millennium. Make sure y'all go check that out after this video. Coming just 13 months after dropping Unpredictable, the LP that cemented his star status, it's a feat in and of itself that Mystikal's vocal cords are able to deliver powerful performances within such a short turnaround on this record. You don't want no static with the hardcore rhyme fanatic, he says on the Rowdy track, that's the nigga, with an incredible level of intensity. He shows and proves that here with his creativity for outlandish verses. For instance, Nas once rapped from the first person perspective of a gun on I Gave You Power, but Mystikal takes on the literal sounds of weapons of war on Round Out the Tank. If an AR-15 or M16 could spit, it would be something like
squeeze the triggers in the mask when it's time to take aim. I'm the bang, ooh, when they ricochet down range.
Putting together hardcore, riveting gangster rap verses is no challenge for Mystikal, and there's a lot of that on here if that's what you're into. Like the Vengeful There He Go, the menacing Respect My Mind, and the mafioso The Stick Up featuring label mate Fiend and an absolute show-stealing appearance from No Limit's first lady, Mia X. Other highlights are Mystikal's humorous storytelling on the fictional coming of age Keep It Hype and the surreal I'm on Fire, as well as him going toe-to-toe with East Coast legends Busta Rhymes and Tretch from Naughty by Nature on What You Want, What You Need, and Dirty South, Dirty Jers, respectively. However, the assembly line production style label boss Percy Miller was putting his artists through is to blame for the flaws on this album. The soundscape on here, all done by in-house team Beats by the Pound, is more half-baked than a semi-fried beignet. If they had just let the gumbo stew a little bit longer by putting more seasoning on the beats and polishing the mixing and mastering, we'd have a better serving. Number 4, let's get ready. Mystikal's relationship with No Limit Records ended in 1999. According to him, the split was amicable, but surprising because he found out that the ride was over when he showed up at the label's offices and saw, quote, everything in boxes. The fall of Masterpiece label probably had a lot to do with his desire to go into different fields of entrepreneurship and money disputes he had with producers Beats by the Pound. Regardless, Mystikal took his talents back to Jive Records, the first major label he signed to craft his 4th album. Mystikal himself said he felt the pressure to concoct something great because this was around the same time Juvenile from the rival New Orleans label Cash Money dropped his most impactful album 400 Degrees, which captured not only the streets but the radios and clubs with its bouncy single Back That Ass Up. Luckily, now that he was no longer limited to No Limit beat makers, Jive Records was able to hook Mystikal up with the most innovative production team to ever come out of Virginia Beach, the Neptunes. Pharrell and Chad Hugo ended up lacing Mystikal with 4 fire beats on this album, 2 of which became the sounds for the biggest singles in his career, Danger and Shake Your Ass. According to Mystikal, he didn't want Shake Your Ass to be the first single because he felt like it would be copying Juvenile. But we're sure as soon as the Jive execs heard those syncopated maracas and Mystikal burst on the track with that wild energy, they knew they had an undeniable hit. With Pharrell providing pimp-type melodies on the hook and Mystikal barking orders to twerk, this song stands up to time better than most club songs from that era. Also, it has one of the funniest opening lines in the first verse.
I came there with my dick in my hand. Don't make me lift me with my foot in your ass, be cool.
Shake Your Ass was a monstrous success, spending weeks on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, appearing in multiple TV shows and movies, and has since become a must-have in a playlist of hip-hop singles from the early 2000s. Danger, the second single, was just as much of a hit and features hypnotic singing from R&B vocalist Nivea, an arousing arabesque beat from the Neptunes, and more fiery vocals from Mystikal. But what else is on Let's Get Ready? Actually a lot of heat, yet there are some misses. If you're looking for that high energy, in-your-face lyricism over hard beats, Mystikal delivers with the tracks Ready to Rumble, Jump, I Rock, I Roll, and Mystikal Fever. The best of these is the last song, You Looking For Me, which showcases his distinct style and lyrical ability over a sparse beat from KLC and Craig B. There are also moments of introspection on this record, which is rare for Mystikal albums. On the Neptunes produced Family, Mystikal raps about the importance of familial bonds, and Ain't Gonna See Tomorrow is a meditation on the societal ills that affect the hood. The flaw of this album is that, once again, the production, aside from the Neptunes' contributions, is subpar. If Mystikal wasn't as captivating as a rapper as he is, songs like The Braids, Big Truck Driver, or I'm Throwed Off would be nearly unlistenable due to their beats. Plus, the biggest missed opportunity is to make the most out of the Outkast collaboration Neck of the Woods. Big Boi and Andre 3000 both drop uncharacteristically forgettable verses over a headache-inducing beat. Let's Get Ready debuted #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and went on to go double platinum, but it doesn't hold a candle next to the third album on this list. Before we get to said album, we had an interesting thought. Mystikal is one of, if not the only artist to have a successful career post No Limit. Sure, Fiend is still putting out quality music and has written for some big artists, but doesn't have the numbers to back him. Snoop Dogg, of course, became the most recognizable rapper of all time, but he was already a star before the tank. It seems like everyone else on the roster either got locked up, fell out of the music scene completely, or even worse, passed away. Do y'all think there's a No Limit curse? Kind of like that supposed Bad Boy one? A Where Are They Now style video may be worth making on the No Limit acts. Let us know in the comments if that's something you would be interested in seeing. Okay, back to the list. #3, Unpredictable. When a young Michael Tyler graduated high school, he didn't know what direction to take his life, so he decided to enlist in the US Army. His main motivation, as he said in interviews, was just to get enough money to buy a Benz. But after being deployed to Iraq for Operation Desert Storm, he found out that conforming to the military code wasn't exactly worth the luxury whip. Before he was discharged, though, he incorporated the yelling of the drill sergeants into his delivery and military know-how into his lyrics. So when his second album, Unpredictable, starts with the sound effects of grenade explosions, artillery fire, and Mystikal shrieking "I was born to be a soldier" over a haunting piano beat, you feel that this is deeper than rap. Also, considering Mystikal is an actual combat veteran, it made sense for him to join No Limit, a record label that used the image of a tank as its branding and where all the artists were referred to as soldiers. Unpredictable was Mystikal's debut on the Master P-led label after he parted ways with Jive, a situation where he felt they didn't market his music properly. According to the artist himself and many longtime fans, this is his magnum opus. They have a strong argument to make considering this LP contains many of the elements and songs endeared by his followers. On here you have street classics like The Man Right Here, a song that's as bold and broad as it is macho, as well as Still Smoking, a staple for stoners. You also have the spine-chilling Murderer 2, a sonic threat to the killer of his sister that goes into graphic detail about what happened to her and what Mystikal will do to him. We could go on and on because Mystikal makes a great impression every time he touches the mic, and the highlights are many on Unpredictable. However, for every track championed by fans like Did I Do It or Unpredictable, we also get horrendous joints like Dig on the Track and Sleeping With Me. For every dope verse, like the first one on Ain't No Limit, we get a feature from a rapper many believe couldn't deliver a fire verse if he was in hell. Hilks a shocker. Excuse me. The multiple appearances from him and Master P bring down the track every single time on every song because they simply can't lyrically compete with Mystikal. The only No Limit MCs that were worth being on tracks with him were Mia X or Fiend, and they only got 2 cameos. Unpredictable was Mystikal's first platinum album and ranked well in our list of No Limit albums from '97. You can check that out here. Yes, we understand that this album holds a lot of nostalgia for older heads, but we have to acknowledge that listening to No Limit far removed from that era is an acquired taste because of the production style and off-kilter rhyming patterns by some of their artists. Therefore, in good conscience, we have to put the next album on this list over Unpredictable because it's more likely to turn someone on to Mystikal rather than off. #2, Tarantella. Mystikal's last album feels like a sophomore release because it comes right after his crossover success of Let's Get Ready, even though it's his 5th. 2001's Tarantella is Mystikal in prime form while capitalizing on his momentum from previous chart success. Running at 54 minutes, this is Mystikal's best produced album due to big-name producers like Scott Storch, Rock Wilder, and frequent collaborators the Neptunes, providing the crisp beats that properly complement his eccentricity. And they're not just bringing tracks that could easily been rapped over by anyone anyone else. The brass horns, the bass lines, the grooves, and breakdowns all have that particular New Orleans flair that make this album sound like a raucous party on Bourbon Street. And to make it even better, we finally have an album from Mystikal that has the proper mixing and mastering that makes all of his vocals fully audible, something that was woefully missing on most of his albums prior to this one. There are a lot of great songs on here, such as the first single, Bouncing Back, produced by the Neptunes. A song about resilience and perseverance, Mystikal commands the mic with prowess like James Brown reincarnated over a sauntering jazzy beat that's so 504, you'd think it was a recording of a second line band. Originally, Mystikal wanted the second song on the album, the hard-hitting Tarantella, to be the first single, but the label thought the message of overcoming tragedy on Bouncing Back would resonate since the country was still reeling from the tragedy of 9/11. Maybe they had the right idea, seeing as how Bouncing Back performed better on the charts than the eventual second single, Tarantella. But come on, Jive. The #1 rap song on the charts that year was Nelly's Hot in Here. Both Bouncing Back and Hot in Here got nominated for Grammys that year, and Hot won, kind of proving the masses just wanted to shake their asses. Regardless, other highlights on this album sound like the best of Mystikal. If It Ain't Live, It Ain't Me, Oh Yeah, Go Ahead, The Return, and Alright all have substantial replay value. Longtime competitor Juvenile appears on Settle the Score, a long-awaited collaboration between two of the Crescent City's finest, and it doesn't disappoint. The beat was actually made by Juvenile himself and is low-key fire. Method Man and Redman bring the bars over a club rocker from Rockwilder on I Get It Started, another banger. The missteps on this album are the dullness of the song Big Truck Driver and how poorly Pussy Crook aged due to circumstances that have since transpired. Tarantella peaked at 25 on the Billboard 200, went on to be certified gold, and was nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Rap Album, but lost to the Eminem Show. While Tarantella will ensnare you in its web, the mind is a maze harder to escape. #1, Mind of Mystikal. It's important to contextualize why Mystikal's debut album deserves the #1 slot in this ranking. It might be hard to believe this now, more than 30 years removed from that era, but hip-hop in New Orleans in 1994 was still in its nascent stages. Future juggernauts like Cash Money and No Limit were still getting it out of the mud. Later legends like Lil Wayne and BG were literally juveniles, and the most popular form of black music then in the streets and clubs of New Orleans was bounce, a fast-paced style of dance music that featured a lot of call and response chants and raunchy lyrics. The beat from the 1986 single Drag Rap by Queens, New York group The Showboys was sampled, remixed, colloquially renamed Trigger Man, and became the staple backdrop of the bounce sound. At that time in New Orleans, it seemed like all people wanted to hear was that type of dance music. Yes, there were early pioneers coming out of the Crescent City like Sporty T, Kilo G, Yellow Boy, and G Slim, but many never caught their big break or had their lives cut short before they could bloom due to New Orleans being the murder capital of America for years during the early 90s. With all of these obstacles in mind, Mystikal made a bold promise and proclamation on his 1994 debut, Mind of Mystikal. On the opening track, Y'all Ain't Ready, Never Gonna Change My Style, Never Gonna Bounce, Never Gonna Bow. And with that, he proceeds to unleash a tirade over 11 tracks of heat. Every verse sounding like he's coming for blood and has something to prove. While he does wear the influence of rappers contemporaneous to this time close to his chest in his flow and subject matter, like the double time of Das Effects and the gangsterism of Spice One, his uniqueness lies in his delivery, screaming, whispering, singing, howling bars, channeling the energy of singers like Little Richard, Howling Wolf, and Muddy Waters. Only 24 years old at the time, Mystikal's vocal style came from the tradition of black blues music much older than him, and he uses his voice as an instrument with the same bravado as fellow New Orleans legend Louis Armstrong when he played the trumpet. The best example of this is the third and final verse of the hard body track I'm. Mystikal brings his lyricism and evocative delivery over a booming bass heavy beat with dark piano keys and a hypnotic synth. Speaking of beats, we mentioned before that what made the No Limit era albums from Mystikal rank lower was due to their production and mixing. Well, we challenge anyone to listen to the instrumentals from Mind of Mystikal against the ones from Ghetto Fabulous or Unpredictable and say that those CDs have better beats or audio quality than this one. When you listen to Mystikal long enough, you begin to realize he is a very self-referential artist, meaning he'll take a hot line he said and make it into a hot song later or remix ideas from previous tracks. If the man right here is your go-to workout song, I hate to break it to you, but Here I Go is where it's derived from, and it's a better track to bench press to. If Still Smoking is what you spark Buddha to, Smoke Something is Kush compared to that. A year before Andre 3000 said the South got something to say at the Source Awards, Mystikal was challenging the norms of what was expected from an MC coming out the bottom of the boot, breaking down barriers for future Southern lyricists. Not everyone in New Orleans was happy about that though. Mystikal's declaration that he never bounced was taken as a diss by some fellow New Orleans natives like the Bee Gees and UNLV. The Bee Gees, a duo comprised of two kids who would later become the other half of the Hot Boys, released a Mystikal disc called Fuck Big Boy, and UNLV dropped their now classic disc Drag 'Em in the River. Mystikal responded with a litany of threats on the menacing tracks Beware and Here I Go, then spun the block on them again with a full song Never Gonna Bounce. Mystikal and UNLV eventually squashed the beef before group member Yellow was killed, and Mystikal himself says he even enjoys playing their disc. Hey, do y'all think Hove ever listens to Ether for fun? Mystikal would later even briefly sign to Cash Money, putting an end to any feud on that side. The point is, so much good music and history is tied to this record that makes this album not only great sonically, but important as well when we tell the tale of New Orleans hip-hop and Mystikal's legacy. Yo, if you enjoyed this list, go check out our playlist of rankings from Dirty South artists featuring countdowns on Wayne, T.I., Luda, and a host of others. Make sure to like and subscribe while you're at it. It's your boy CJ Williams. Until next time, I'm out.